Hey, welcome everyone to another edition, originally called Stock Talk from Studio 59. We're now changing the energy podcasts and live streams to Power is Power. So you will be seeing more of that. Um, the opportunity has presented ourselves to do a lot more power uh, discussions. So I want to make sure that I give everybody that heads up. That's what's going on. Um, and I'm going to immediately turn it over to Clinton Smith for a talk about Google Data Center. Go ahead.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Phil and Elon, for joining and inviting me to be here as well. So super excited, guys. Thank you. I see a few people have also joined here. Really appreciate it. Good to see you guys. So as Phil mentioned, this is the Power is Power podcast. We're upgrading things just like the data centers need upgrades and the energy infrastructure needs upgrades. As just to get into it quickly here. So energy obviously is the foundation of any modern economy, and the AI data centers are under full scale electrification, and the industry depends on one thing: reliable power. So, myself being in the energy industry, boots on the ground, and these guys in other capacities as well for decades, Phil in the banking and industry, and then of course Amon with the energy analyst expertise. What we're seeing is an opportunity to share what we're seeing as boots on the ground. And from an analytical perspective, now I can say this: the next decade, it won't be defined by who has the best AI. It's going to be defined by who has energy. So, with that getting started here, there's a Google data center in Minnesota. It's 700 megawatts is the total demand power. It consists of 300 megawatts of wind and 400 megawatts of battery storage. Um, this is just one example of the scale of the size of these hyperscaler data centers that are coming online. 700 megawatts is huge. And so it's not just tech expansion or even project expansion. It's getting to the point where now we need actually energy infrastructure expansion. And let me just explain a little bit about this on what I'm learning here as I'm meeting folks in the industry from Equinix and Digital Realty and others. They're sharing their expertise too. The data centers that are coming out with the agentic chips are going to be able to do a lot more than what we've been using these AIs for. As Phil's nodding and anyone knows as well, we're using these AIs for a lot of things, but we haven't even, I don't think, scratched the surface of what's going to happen. And what's coming down the line pretty soon, I think it has a little bit to do with the AI chip infrastructure upgrades that are coming down the line. And if you take a look at the last podcast we had done with Phil and um, uh, DG Matrix, you'll see get a little bit of insights of what's coming down the line. Bottom line is that these agentic chips are going to have to be upgraded that are rolling out to be able to do what AI is going to be capable of doing. And it's going to be an agentic multi-step process where you can then send your agents to go out and do a whole bunch of stuff. So that's really what's coming down the line. But from an energy perspective, these data centers think of energy almost like a stiff board. When you have this kind of energy that's needed for that type of data center that's 750 megawatts or whatever, you basically, you could watch, if you saw those lines and energy flowing through it and they weren't clamped down, you could see those lines moving. Like, the power is tremendous. And so these surges and pulses that will be coming from these data centers on the energy infrastructure, the grid, are just going to be massive. And when you start doing that kind of surging, things get burnt up. You get a lot of current flowing through components. So bottom line, what these data centers are basically doing when they say they're going to build the grid is they're going to be building their data centers and the grid infrastructure to tie into the grid with these upgrades. So that's what I'm seeing on the ground, and I think is going to be coming down the line with some of the announcements that we expect to see from NVIDIA and others with the agentic chips. I think Jensen Huang uh, signaled that he's going to be have a big announcement on new chips soon. I think it's this month. So anyway, I'll let you guys take it away from
Yeah,
there.
couple of great report. Yeah, the GTC Global Technical Conference is actually coming up next week. It's in San Jose. Our good friend Lon Cunningham from DG Matrix is actually going to be there with a booth and a number of people from their organization. Very jealous of that. And I think one of the
Good.
key things I pulled out of this information about Google's data center, along with Minnesota Power, is that we're getting behind the meter. They're basically doing what announced with Microsoft, where they said, "Hey, what we're doing with two of our major data centers will not interrupt the power flow to citizens of the United States. If anything, we're going to add to the grid rather than take from the grid." So to me, this is just another announcement saying, okay, here's 300 megawatts of wind, 400 megawatts of battery storage. We're not going to take anything from Minnesota. And I think that's the key to more and more of these organizations, these citizenship organizations that are saying, not in my backyard. So that's a big takeaway too, in addition to what you're talking about.
Right.
Now the chips coming out, just to kind of put a, kind of put the blanket over the top of that fire a little bit, is uh, Rubin's coming out soon. Vera Rubin will be out later on, and those are going to be so much more efficient that even though it's creating more energy in the way of tokens, it's using less overall energy from the grid. So we're getting to a point now, and you're going to see some other things in this live stream that we're going to talk about with uranium, which sounds scary, I know, but there's things coming down the road that are making this process of needing power for the next industrial revolution so much better for citizens in the global environment. So that's what I got. If you don't have anything, Amon, I'd love for you to jump into the oil industries that's going on with Iran.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick point about the data centers, because I know it just came out today. There's or Trump's trying to introduce a kind of like a ratepayer protection pledge, which is basically an agreement for a lot of these big tech companies to um, basically purchase the power upfront in power purchase agreements. So, I guess as of today, Google, Microsoft, Meta, Oracle, OpenAI have all agreed to this protection pledge. So, it's very, very exciting for
Yeah, so
ratepayers, I guess, to
it's
not,
an election year, so they've got to
yeah,
do something to appease the majority of the United States. It's saying, we're kind of worried about this thing, right? We don't understand AI very well. We certainly don't need these data centers, as far as we can tell, because they are a little bit limited on knowledge.
right.
You've got to put something out as a politician, or lots of politicians, to say, we got you back. We're going to make them provide their
Exactly.
power. So I apologize for interrupting.
No, yeah, that's absolutely it. So we'll see how effective it actually is after the elections kind of die down a little bit, but definitely, yeah, definitely a lot to monitor. So yeah, not to completely shift towards kind of what's going on in Iran right now, but I'm just gonna give like a super quick update for kind of each of the Middle Eastern countries affected by the US and Israel's attacks on Iran this weekend. So kind of the biggest center that's been affected is the this kind of peninsula around the UAE, which is called the Strait of Hormuz. Basically, just this kind of looping body of water that most of the oil and LNG tankers pass through to basically facilitate trade in the US, in China, and all in the Middle East. And that is basically in the center of Iran on the coast there. What's so difficult about it, is because that, yeah, like 20 to 30% of the global oil and LNG supply, specifically exports, go through this, kind of looping strait. And as of right now, that's completely paused. So all the tankers there are basically anchors down, as of the Reuters article that I read. And it's theoretically going to be a big problem, just for overall supply in the global economy. So, to run through it quickly, Qatar has completely halted LNG production, after Iranian drones struck, some of their major energy facilities in, Ras Laffan and Mesaid, um, which, has the world's largest LNG export infrastructure right now. So a lot of ripple effects from there. Saudi Arabia, has been directly hit, specifically their oil. Again, the Ras Tanura refinery, which is one of their main core refining and export hubs. So they've shut down operations as well. Then Kuwait, which made the media for, um, kind of having some friendly fire, difficulties with the US. I think they shot down like 3 of the US planes. So yeah, 3 of them. So, unrelated to oil, also severely restricted, by that kind of Gulf, security situation. A lot of the tanker traffic, as I just mentioned, in the Strait of Hormuz. And then, they apparently export around 3 million barrels, per day of crude oil to the market. So that's a big, huge impact there. Um, and they lack a lot of the pipeline routes, that could kind of provide an alternative to the Hormuz Straits. So, that's another problem with their exports. Jordan, again, kind of repeating myself, doesn't produce exportable oil, but, again, super close to the main strikes that have been happening. And then the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, also again has, seen their energy infrastructure severely impacted, including their fuel storage at the Fujairah, another export hub, um, more shutdowns there. So, and then finally, Iraq, which is, OPEC's second largest producer of oil, in the Middle East. A lot of trouble with their exports, and basically all of their Basra exports are blocked. So again, output is severely cut off. And then just a lot of safety in general. Like they're not going to continue production with potential drone strikes coming on. So it's a lot of difficulty there, and they have around 4 million barrels per day of capacity. So, yeah, it's again, this kind of war and the strikes could happen for another 4 to 5 weeks. Um, Oil has risen to its largest peak since June 2025 at around $81 per barrel. And it could even reach to 100 to $120 per barrel in the next month. Which is it's a big contrast, to like the $50 per barrel, um, rate that was just like a month or two ago. So, big change. It's all just due to lack of supply. And yeah, we'll definitely see how it goes. So,
Just
lots to monitor.
Tuesday to Wednesday, we went up 40 cents a gallon here for unleaded. So
Right. Yeah.
that's a big for an area that typically has extremely low, gas costs.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. As you said, LNG too, I think is maybe will impact us more just because it's natural gas is, I think, around 40% of our total energy infrastructure. So, um, especially I'm in New England, we get a lot of our exports from, the EU, which is struggling a lot with that. So it impacts everyone. If it even is just not the Middle East, it's everyone. So
yep, I get it. Um, thank God we have uh, our own destiny as a United States of America. We have our own destiny now because if this happened in 1975, oh my goodness, We
Yeah.
no gasoline because we didn't take control of our own ability to be a net exporter of oil and natural gas. Same thing. We now have
Right.
so much natural gas that we can get out of the ground. We have as much or more than any other country in the world. So we are a net exporter of LNG as well. So, you know,
Right.
we don't always do everything right as a country, but we certainly got the thing under our control from what happened back in the gas crisis of 1978, 79.
Right.
Anything else before I move into our next topic? Okay. So, anxious to talk about this new process for nuclear. I got two nuclear updates to do, and would love any input that you guys have, or any questions that our esteemed viewers might have. But there's a new process called, well, it's not new, but it's being revolutionized. There's a product called thorium. It's very, very natural occurring, and it's weakly radioactive, silver white metal. And when you, I'm not going to bore you with the chemistry lesson. You know, it really gets into a chemistry lesson, but you mix it
Right.
with uranium in the reactor itself, and you get a remarkable transformation. Uh,
Mhm.
so I'd much rather cover the benefits as to instead of the, the how to and the, the X's and O's. So it's 3 to 4 times more abundant in the Earth's crust than our uranium. It dramatically reduces the long term waste from tens of thousands of years to potentially hundreds of years. All right. So that is a huge ability for us to be able to use the decays to safe levels in, a quarter of the time, if even that. The third benefit is we don't need to upgrade the reactors we already have. So you could put this directly and drop in, they call it a drop-in capability. You can drop it right in to what we have today
Right.
into the world's existing reactors. You don't have to do any fitting or any changes to existing reactors.
Right.
It's more energy dense than typical uranium, so it allows for a higher burnup rate. And in order to have that, you get about 18 to 24 months is your typical time frame for refueling cycles.
Mhm.
And now you're going to go and not have to shut down. Every time they shut down, it's about $2 million to shut down. I'm putting my power on. Sorry. So right now, it's about $2 million every time you shut down a large power plant. So you avoid those shutdown, and it saves $2 million per day, not per shutdown, per day. So that's kind of cool.
That's
Um,
incredible. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so kind of, it's not seamless and deployable now solution, but it's close. And there's not that much we have to
Mhm.
in order to get it there. Um, it's just seen as a complementary technology, and it's
Yeah.
more sustainable. It's a vital bridge as we try to get the small modular nuclear reactors on board, which I have an update on that as well. So
Yeah.
it really just takes that finite uranium reserve and makes it last so much longer. And
Right.
it's not costly a product to get out of the ground or to get into the nuclear reactor. Um, the fourth thing I like is that developing these resources of thorium is really not a big issue. They can hedge against global supply shocks, price volatilities, all kinds of good information about increasing their own energy independence.
Right.
Um, Another thing that I like is it's politically um, viable. So you can reduce, because you're reducing the toxicity of nuclear waste, it's much more acceptable by the citizens of those countries that use it. Um, it has absolutely no downside as all of nuclear does. And because its burnup rate is so high, you're less likely to have a China syndrome or a 3 Mile Island situation potentially because it's more controllable when you add it to the 232 uranium. Finally, you don't have to make a risky or all or nothing bet on this kind of thing. You can gradually test blends You can start with 10% thorium and see how it does without it creating any kind of an issue, then kind of bolster it upwards over time until you hit the right. Even if you put too much in, nothing bad can happen through that process. So would love to welcome any feedback that anybody has.
Yeah, well, yeah, not to jump in, but I think the biggest thing about thorium that's so different is that it doesn't need to be enriched, like uranium does. And I'm no expert at all, but, like, I know for uranium, it's they use the 235 uranium isotope, which is, I think around, like in naturally occurring uranium, it's, like, 1% of the entire substance. So you have to, like, kind of or inject to get, like, a higher percentage of the 235. But for thorium, it's obviously not the case, and it can't be enriched. So, again, yeah, as you were saying, it's so it can there's more supply. I know for uranium supply, Russia theoretically, like, historically has had so much more of that capacity, and the US has only begun to mine that up, like, in recent years. So if we can kind of get a bigger grasp on thorium, that infrastructure early on, that'd be great. So, lots to
I
look forward to.
I see them adding it to nuclear facilities in 2027, at least in a 10% range, because there's not a lot of concern about what it's gonna do. They've done plenty of sampling. So
Mm,
it does not look to me like they're going to have as much regulation to add it because of all the benefits and the fact that although you burn higher, it does not require the water cooling towers that we're used to nearly as.
mhm.
So there's a lot of benefits to this potentially. So I wouldn't be surprised by the end of 2027 if we see it being used.
Right, yeah.
Uh, any
Definitely exciting.
anything
I,
for you?
I know, yeah, I know that China, Russia, US, all the major superpowers are investing heavily in understanding this as a complement to nuclear reactors. The challenge, I think, is that it is still economically challenged, like all new technologies. And I think that's where they're trying to get it to. And when the challenge with that would be that it's like an alternate fuel, meaning everything that's running off of what it's running on today might have to be modified potentially. Again, not to throw cold water, but just to kind of like balance. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting addition to bringing nuclear reactors online again faster because we're definitely going to need it. That's like you mentioned behind the meter, Phil, is really where the sweet spot is at the moment, just because, again, that grid infrastructure is challenged. And the internet or the interconnection queues are, even if you go behind the meter, you still have to go to the utility. And unless you completely cut yourself off and said, hey, we don't need the utility anymore, which isn't going to happen. There's no data center anywhere that's going to completely cut themselves off from having the utility available if they need it.
Maybe space.
So, huh?
Maybe
Yeah, in space. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm just saying at the moment. And so, what you have at the moment, at least for the next 5 years, I think I posted on it. I'll share some more stuff later. Berkeley Labs, for example, they've done some good studies on this and shown what the interconnection queues look like. And so, who's bid into the market to get the queues in place to get there. So, you have to go and basically apply to put these megawatts of power and have a connection to the grid. And again, what'll happen is even if you do it behind the meter, next time I'll have some schematics too I could share. But when you put it behind the meter, you're basically shifting. If this were the meter and that's the grid, you're taking all of your consuming things and your power producing things and you're moving them over here. So that now the energy that comes from the grid, it's not as much. Why? Because you're producing 90% of your energy on site behind the meter. This is the billing meter. This is the revenue grade meter that comes from the utility. It also goes through telemetry to their facility in real time to measure the energy, the electrons that are flowing through the meter. They do the same thing with your gas meter, and this happens in every single utility-owned market around the US currently. So even though there's different players, you got PG&E up north in California, San Diego Gas and Electric down south in California, and SoCal Edison sort of in the middle. I'm just using California as an example. Each one of those have interconnection queues and applications. Big picture, they're the same. If you looked at each one, they're not so drastically different that you're like, oh my God, this one's so different, but they follow a structure, but they are different. And so every little process is different. When you go to the utility and you say, hey, we want to put this on, then you got to have meetings, you got to fill out applications, you got to pay bills, just to get ready to get started to put this stuff on the grid requires a substantial upfront investment on land use costs, analysis, grid studies, a lot of different things. And so one of the things I was talking with Lon Kaningas while we were finishing up the podcast on this last one that you guys really have to catch. It was so much fun from DG Matrix. And he basically had, kind of said the same thing. Yeah, that's behind the meter now. We're going to eliminate a lot of that. But at the same time, you still have interconnection queue times. And like I said, I don't want to do it here. I could share it, but I don't want to do it here because I'm afraid I might mess up. I'm not familiar with the Substack live stream. So next time I'll be prepared. I'll do a little homework and I'll be prepared to share some of these graphical representations just to kind of show how impacted it is. To put it in a blurb, it's about 20% of what's been applied that's actually going to make it through the queue over the next 2 to 3 years, according to Berkeley and the others who are doing the studies. And it's a result of our current constraints. The good news is everybody's working on it. And because the administration's even involved and claiming national security, which it is national security without a doubt, we've been saying that for years. It's really lit a fire underneath all of this to be able to do what we got to do to collectively to take care of these energy demand constraints. So I'm very excited to see what's going to happen coming up on this NVIDIA conference. I posted it, by the way. Sorry I didn't post as a link.
That.
Yeah, but you guys can copy and paste it and just put that in your browser and you'll see
Well, two things, if you don't mind me jumping in. The one is that a lot of the GTC is available on the NVIDIA site. You can watch the presentations through the NVIDIA website. You just have to sign up ahead of time and no cost. The other thing I wanted to point out is you bring up a really good point in kind of a roundabout way. You bring up a really good point that all of these things that we're talking about right now are mostly going to be stopgap measures until we come up with another holy grail that is going to satisfy energy for, a good period of time. So things like thorium, it's a great idea. They really want to use it more for the 440 nuclear reactors that are in operation around the world now, not so much for any new ones that they bring online. That'd be great. But what they're saying is you got to start doing this now to have less waste that takes thousands and tens of thousands of years before it can be around humans again. If we bring it down to 300-400 years, which is still in question, I know, but they know it's a lot less than 10,000, a lot less. So they're saying this is a stopgap measure. Most of the things we're covering on Power is Power is basically stopgap measures until we can get the Holy Grail done, which is probably the small modular nuclear reactors in a safe environment, right?
Right.
Make sense?
Yeah.
It does.
It kind of leads into the other thing I wanted to cover about AOLO. Some of you guys might remember that we've covered AOLO on one or two occasions previously. It's AAOLO. AOLO is how I pronounce it. And it's a site up in Idaho that's partnered with the Department of Energy. Chris Wright is the Secretary of Energy. And they have established this location. I was trying to find a video that showed the upgraded amount of construction they had a video, like a drone, that went around the site for once a week for like 4 months. And it was really cool to see the construction site coming up pretty quickly. There is no video for what's happened since then. So I couldn't find an updated video that was as cool as the last one, but they're on
They're
target.
trying to surprise us, yeah.
Yeah, on target.
Let's hope it works.
You could see it on Facebook, some of this stuff if you want. They actually have a site on Facebook. I haven't visited it yet, but I got 160 days to go. So they're more than halfway past their 365-day metric to have it ready for July 4th for our 250th anniversary of this country. Now, the one that they're going to have ready to go is not going to be the one that we would love to have fully operational and large as can be. This one's only a 5,000 square foot facility, but it's going to be enough to run a 10 megawatt data center in the same co-location, which is pretty cool, right? So they've partnered with a number of people, Oklo, the Department of Energy. Now they've brought in GE Vernova, and they've given the rods have been created for the site for the actual nuclear uh, uranium. They've turned over the rods in Texas to GE Vernova, who are going to finish that process and install them into the nuclear reactor. So that's pretty cool too. But the basement and the fit ups are all done. So that part is, usually the part that takes almost the longest time to do. And I'm checking my notes here so I don't make any mistakes for you guys.
Yeah.
It's going to operate at a very low pressure, yet high power temperature. And this is the hot sodium that we've been talking about on the Power is Power for, I don't know, Eamon, months now.
Right, yeah, since the summer, I bet.
So a little
Okay.
background if you're new to the video, a little background on hot sodium. So it operates at a low pressure, high temperature. It reduces accidents that can happen while providing superior heat transfer. It enables the recycling of long-lived nuclear waste into fuel. So we've talked about that, and I'm hoping that the thorium added to the uranium can also be added to this hot sodium. That has not, I've not found an article about that yet. So new, the thorium so new that it would further utilize the waste of the uranium byproduct that has to sit underground for thousands of years. So if you could use that as an energy source through hot sodium process, wow, that becomes another leg of the stool that we're trying to create a buffer until the miracle from heaven comes down on energy sometime soon. You got to think small modular nuclear reactors for this. 5,000 square feet. It's co-located with the 10 megawatt data center that would be running in mid 2027. So they're going to have the actual uh, example ready to go. They think July, hopefully July 4th, but July of 2026. But then they'd have the next attach it to the actual data center before 2027 is over. So that's
Right.
kind of cool. And all of the engineers and physicists and everybody who works at this site have already been trained. They've gotten through all their certifications that they need to do with the Department of Energy, which isn't surprising since they're co-located on Department of Energy's lab. Yeah, failed to mention.
Right.
So not only is it the Department of Energy is one of their 17 lab sites in Idaho, it's also a data center. It's also a power plant altogether. We've been encouraging people that have the expertise to bid on these kinds of locations to be able to have a behind the meter, solution in the Department of Energy's backyard, so they can then help at the Chris Wright level. His organization can help people do it more effectively around other parts of the country. So that's kind of cool.
Very
So
cool.
questions on that?
Yeah, I it's so hard with a lot of these partnerships. As you said, it's so great that, like, Ale is partnered with, like, Oklo and G Vernova. Like, I think as soon as you said G Vernova, like, I trust that anything that they're doing so much. Oklo's stock has tanked a bunch, which is at least concerning in my eyes, but, I think it will eventually like, I think the CEO just sold, like, around 140,000 shares of their stock, so
Well, it's at
it's
880 last time I looked. So this is a stock that was
yeah,
at 400 6 months ago. So
yeah.
God bless, man. That's the way to go.
It's tough, so I think yeah, that July period is gonna be really exciting, but, there's so much volatility until they actually get a product online. I think it'll be just a lot of news, baiting, and,
Well, it
um
every day, doesn't it? Changes every day.
yeah,
Every,
absolutely, yeah.
every week there's a new thing to discuss. That's why you see some of these podcasts are now twice a week in some cases because of the amount of information that's coming out. I did want to mention something to you that you touched on, Clinton, about NVIDIA. So they bought, I believe it was $2 billion for each to two companies for their optronics. So they're planning on future um, chips design to include like a fiber optic element or a new type of fiber optonic that's beyond fiber as we know it, strands of fiber. So you combine that with what we covered with DG Matrix of going from, AC DC, right? And you combine that with the optronics. Can you see anything there, Clinton, that could be of value to making things faster, cooler, more efficient?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm glad you brought it up, Phil, because they inside the data center and this infrastructure that we're talking about. So imagine the data center and then imagine some generators, and they could be the SMRs, they could be microturbines, they could be solar, they could be any of these options that are available. That's the power gen. And then you're going to have chillers to cool the data center. And you're going to have electronic components and the IT infrastructure. And this all goes into the PUE calculations of the efficiency of data centers. Um, at the end of the day, the better it communicates, and fiber optics is phenomenal, glass, right? That and light, speed of light. I could see that being huge. One of the questions that comes up right away when and we brought it up with DG Matrix was, yeah, okay, but how does it work like in reality, like in outside the lab where the grid's dirty? And, they have pilots, so they're testing that, of course.
Well, I can tell you
Oh,
that I'm sorry, but I could tell you that from being in telephony all those years that, I lived through the era when we went from copper to fiber and literally
oh,
millions
wow.
of miles of fiber were being planted. I even sold some down in Florida to connect Home Depot with fiber way back in the day. So it's definitely, it should reduce the amount of, I'm hoping, the amount of copper that needs to be in that. We've mentioned before, these racks have 2 miles of copper in each rack, right? The rack's about 8 feet high by about 4 feet wide, has a couple 100,000 NVIDIA chips in it for each rack. Um, but it has a lot of copper. And copper's fine, but it does have a shelf life to a certain extent in terms of how much is in the ground. Prices have been going up now for the last year pretty steadily in copper prices, commodity. And fibers are so much quicker. I mean, it's thousands of times quicker to run things. And that's why you notice, like, example, Verizon as a phone carrier and as a telecommunications company, they bought a company out of California, and they just closed on that deal. It's been running for about 2 years now, and they finally got everybody to bless it in the regulatory environment. And what they're doing is they're doing direct to home and direct to business with fiber.
Okay.
Have any copper anymore, and that's not easy to do in old school places like Boston or Philadelphia, where things don't have the room to be able to put in new services. But it certainly works everywhere, like Texas, Minnesota, you know, Florida, anywhere that isn't from the 1780s. You have the ability to do it very quickly and easily. So that's something that too we could see. I believe the name of that company was Frontier Telephone. They were out of Northern California, and they had a huge business in fiber optics. So it'll be interesting to see how we get these things coming, because we got, if I do this correctly, we have Vera Rubin for the chips coming out. And then the next one, which is the end of 2027, is Typhon, Typhon, I believe. Typhon. And those are the NVIDIA chips. We're in Blackwell Grace right now. That's doing great. We'll always have a need for Blackwell Grace. We'll always have a need for Hopper chips. But as time goes by, these things are getting more efficient, faster, more tokenization, which means more intelligence. You guys mentioned earlier about LLMs. This AGI is now into inferencing, and pretty soon we'll be calling it super intelligence, not inferencing. So the concept of inferencing, for those on the call that aren't aware, is simply the ability for a AI to be able to reason with us as humans, and probably in a way more intelligent than 95% of the people on this planet. Once we hit super intelligence, they're going to be able to be smarter than everybody on the planet for the most part. So you need more and more and more of these efficiencies. You need more of the tokenization, because they tell you that the example is that a token of the word "the" is about 3 to 4 tokens. To create the word "the" is about 3 to 4 tokens. So you can imagine in a paragraph, and then in a book, and then in a congressional library, how many teraflops you might need, right? So that's how they measure the amount of intelligence. And the more intelligence you can put into the AI as an organism, so to speak, for bad choice of words maybe, but as an organism, then the more GDP, the more gross domestic product you get back out. We are anticipating a 4 to 5% gross domestic product in 2026, which is huge compared to the 3% we've been averaging for the last 10 years. Now they're talking we might actually hit 7%, at least the mid sixes. Well, once you hit 10% gross domestic product, that's money coming out of trees type money. That's amazing amount of abundance, and prices will fall because gross domestic product, they can only put so much in their pocket. They're obviously going to have to pay taxes, right? Well, enough taxes will be coming in that you won't need as much taxation to be able to help the world, help the country, help the poor, you know? So it's a very interesting concept of where we're at today. They're now saying we're in the third inning of a 9-inning game. Last year, they said we're in about inning 1 or 2, but it's happening a lot faster than they anticipated. Originally, they said 2035. Now they're saying 2030. It's only 4 years away. So as these things start getting smarter, they create havoc and chaos to the common man who doesn't really understand what's in it for them. But it also creates a lot of abundance and profits, which I believe will be reconstrued and distributed throughout the world. I believe it's more of that than it is of everybody being a greedy CEO.
Right. Yeah.
So with that,
I agree.
if you guys have anything else, throw it out. Otherwise, we'll start wrapping it up.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I learned a lot as well. So thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of great information. So
Yeah, thank you. Every time I get on this, I learn so many new things from you guys, and I'm excited to start to get some more questions as we continue to go on. No pressure to the audience, but as we go on and we get a little bit better, and we can deliver more closely what it is that you're interested to hear about. I'm excited because there's so many opportunities. And even though there are always the dark side, the scary side, we're not talking enough about all the positive that can happen. And so I'm just super excited. So happy to be here, excited about the new Power is Power, and excited to do new clean energy projects for folks. We're an EPC on the West Coast. If you need someone to help evaluate a project, look me up. Just give me a message. I'll schedule a time.
And we got
So
Yes, coming up in the coming months. So also I would tell you guys that are listening, message one of the three of us if you have an idea for someone. Maybe you subscribe to someone who has background in some of these things. Message us and we'll reach out and we'll see if we can't get them on a future podcast or live stream. I'm doing that daily, reaching out to people and saying, are you interested? Are you open to the idea? And some aren't, and some are a little afraid to get in the chair, so to speak. But that's all right. We'll find more. So, but you guys can help us by finding more of those people. I'm looking very seriously also at anybody who has any information above and beyond what's out in the news for the biological sciences on the Yamanaka process, which is a stem cell process that just broke through recently. So if you know anybody who knows anything about the Yamanaka process, please ping me, message me, do whatever you have to get to me because I'd love to have that person on the podcast as well.
Real quick on the Yamanaka process, I believe that's similar to. I'm just making a note here for others to see later. I think that's similar to what is that protocol? What is a cure?
Well, it's mostly curing muscle disease right now, which I have issues with. So that's one reason why I'm interested. But it has a lot of opportunities for many, many disease controls. Because what's happening is we're now that AI is doing protein research for us, instead of us having to take those little vials, and have to squeeze a little bit in there and then try another one and try another one. You see those on TV and movies all the time, right? Where they have a rack of little test tubes and they're filling them up with stuff. No, no, it's all done now through AI. It's all done through imagination, essentially, where they can break down diseases and be able to cure things without having to put them in a petri dish in the little, fridge in the corner of the lab to see how they grow in the next 3 to 4 days. They can do millions at one time now. So we're going to start to see these
Oh,
diseases and the things get cured over time. I think the first one that's probably going to go down is the ones surrounding allergies because they say it's the easiest one to be able to correct and to overcome. Um, there was a study in China that just came out. I don't want to bore people. There's a study in China that just came out where they were able to take a diabetic 1 or a diabetic 2 and completely remove the the disease from their body simply by creating stem cells from their own stem cells. So they're basically, it's like, imagine, think of it like you've heard of biological meat. Same concept. You can grow the meat in a lab and then sell it. Same concept. You could take some of your own DNA and reprocess it to go and fill in the gaps on muscles, on uh, your pancreas for diabetes so that you don't have an insulin resistance anymore. Now the one from China, if they allowed you to do it as an American, it's a several $40,000 per to get, cured. So it's a lot of money, but with more scale comes lower prices. We've seen that with everything, right? The more volume, the lower the prices. So
my dad had a deadly disease that he had stem cell therapy. Talk about it more on another opportunity, but he had stem cell therapy saved his life and totally cutting edge alien type technology. If you had asked me before he did it, it would have been like, no way, there's no way this is going to work. It works. It worked.
and
So
what's cool
this
is
was your
the Aka process takes it to a whole new level, right?
crazy.
So
Yeah,
I
that's
want to
awesome.
I just want to learn more about it by having somebody on live stream podcast to get a better understanding around it because there's very limited information I can find. But I bet you there's somebody out there on Substack as a doctor or as a writer because I'm really blown away by some of the people on Substack and how famous they are and how little they need Substack, but they like it as an outlet for themselves. So. Well, I appreciate everything today. We've had a long talk, covered a lot of different things as usual. Thank you to my podcast mates, Clinton Scott Smith, Eamon O'Malley. Please, when you do see this, whether it's on Substack, uh, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, give it a like, give it a heart, and please subscribe. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Yeah.
Have a good
Bye
night.
now.